My wife insisted I apologize to her male best friend for upsetting him. I agreed. I went to his place and right in front of his wife, I said. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Norman Calder stood at the kitchen sink of their rented lake house in Table Rock, Missouri, staring at a coffee mug that had gone cold hours ago. The ceramic felt rough under his thumb, a cheap tourist piece, and had bought their first day here. Our last vacation together, he thought, though she didn't know it yet. Outside the window, the lake stretched flat and gray under a low sky. Early morning fog clung to the water's surface like gauze over a wound. A few fishing boats drifted in the distance, their occupants invisible, their purpose singular and honest. Norman envied them that simplicity. Inside, the silence had weight. He could hear, and behind him, the soft tap of her thumb against her phone screen. Rapid, nervous. She'd been doing that more lately, scrolling through nothing, avoiding eye contact, filling dead air with the glow of a screen. He'd started counting the seconds between taps. 30, 20, sometimes just 10. Norman had grown up poor in rural Arkansas, in a town where the gas station closed at 6 and the nearest hospital was 40 minutes away. His father had raised him alone after his mother left, taught him to fix engines and split wood and never, ever beg. A man stands on his own 2 feet, his father used to say, hands black with grease, voice steady as bedrock. You want something, you earn it. You lose something, you rebuild. Norman had rebuilt himself into someone dependable. Logistics management wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. He was good at seeing problems before they happened, at planning routes, and managing inventory and anticipating failure points. At work, people respected him, trusted him. He thought and did too. You embarrassed him, and said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. She still hadn't looked up from her phone. You owe Ryan an apology. Norman set the mug down carefully. His hands were steady. They'd been steady for weeks now, even as everything inside him turned sharp and cold. Ryan, he repeated, tasting the name. Your best friend? Yes. And his voice had that practiced calm she used when she was lying. Norman had learned to recognize it. The slight upward inflection at the end of sentences. The way she wouldn't quite finish her thoughts. He didn't deserve that accusation. You made him uncomfortable. Norman dried his hands on a dish towel, taking his time. The cotton was damp, smelled faintly of mildew. Nothing in this rental worked quite right. The toilet ran all night. The bedroom door stuck. The whole place was a lie, pretending to be a getaway. You didn't deny it, he said quietly, and finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, ringed with makeup she hadn't fully removed last night. She'd been beautiful when they met 10 years ago at a company picnic. Bright laugh, easy smile. She made him feel like maybe he deserved something good. Now she just looked like a stranger using a familiar face. I'm tired, Norman, she said, that rehearsed patience creeping back in. I don't want another argument. He nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. He'd stopped arguing 3 weeks ago, right after he'd found the first text message. She'd left her phone on the bathroom counter while she showered, and it had lit up with a notification. Miss you already, it said. From Ryan. Sent at 11:47 p.m. Norman hadn't confronted her then. He'd done something smarter. He'd started documenting. I think I'll go for a drive, Norman said, his voice neutral. Clean my head. And shoulders relaxed slightly. That's probably good. We both need some space. Space. As if distance could fix what was already broken. Norman walked to the bedroom and grabbed his jacket from the chair. The morning air coming through the cracked window was cool, carried the smell of wet earth and old leaves. Fall was settling in early this year. He checked his phone once before leaving. The hidden folder was still there, password protected, invisible unless you knew where to look. 47 screenshots, 12 voice recordings, a spreadsheet tracking dates and times and inconsistencies in her stories. Norman wasn't angry anymore. Anger was emotion, and emotion made you sloppy. He was precise. The drive to Ryan Holloway's house took 43 minutes, door to door. Norman had made the trip twice before, once for a barbecue last summer, once to help Ryan move a couch he'd bought off Craigslist. Both times, and had ridden in the passenger seat, laughing at Ryan's jokes, touching his arm when she talked. Norman hadn't noticed then, or maybe he had, and he'd just chosen to believe it meant nothing. Now he drove alone. No radio, no podcasts, just the steady hum of tires on asphalt and the quiet machinery of his thoughts clicking into place. Ryan lived in a subdivision outside Branson, one of those planned communities with identical mailboxes and houses that differed only in paint color. His was beige with white trim, a two-car garage, and a yard that looked professionally maintained. Ryan worked in sales, medical equipment, something lucrative enough to afford this kind of comfort. He was good at selling things, good at making people believe him. Norman pulled into the driveway at 9:47 a.m. He sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing steady. Through the living room window, he could see movement. Someone passing by with a coffee cup. His phone buzzed. "Anne, where are you?" Norman didn't respond. He pocketed the phone and got out of the car. The front door was painted red. Cheerful. Welcoming. Norman pressed the doorbell and heard it chime inside. Some elaborate melody, probably customizable through an app. Everything in Ryan's life was designed to impress. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Brooke Holloway stood in the doorway, and Norman felt something unexpected. Pity. She was practical-looking, the kind of woman who ran PDA meetings and remembered everyone's dietary restrictions. No makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a university sweatshirt that had seen better days. Her smile was genuine when she saw him, though it faded quickly as she registered his expression. "Hey," she said carefully. "Is everything okay?" Norman returned the smile. Calm, friendly. The face he wore at work when he needed to deliver bad news about shipment delays or budget cuts. "I'm here to apologize," he said. Brooke hesitated, her hand still on the door. Behind her, Norman could hear a television playing, morning news, something about weather patterns. Normal sounds. Ordinary life. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said, though her voice carried uncertainty. Norman crossed the threshold. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon, something baking or maybe just a candle. Photos lined the hallway wall. Ryan and Brooke at their wedding. Ryan and Brooke on a beach somewhere tropical. Ryan and Brooke at a baseball game. No children. Norman had asked once. Brooke had said they were waiting for the right time. "Ryan," Brooke called toward the back of the house. "Norman's here." The television volume dropped. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Ryan appeared, and Norman watched his face cycle through confusion, then recognition, then that practiced confidence sliding back into place like a mask. He was tall, athletic in the way men who played recreational sports stayed athletic. Good jaw, easy grin. The kind of man who'd never been told no and couldn't imagine being refused. "Man," Ryan said, chuckling as he approached. His hand extended for a shake. "This is awkward." Norman took the hand. Firm grip. Eye contact. Professional. "Yes," Norman said, releasing the handshake. "It is." Brooke stood to the side, arms now crossed over her chest. Her instincts were good. Norman could see her sensing something wrong, some shift in the air that didn't match the polite words being spoken. "Why don't we sit down?" she suggested, though it sounded more like a question. The living room was comfortable in that staged way furniture showrooms looked comfortable. Gray sectional sofa, glass coffee table, throw pillows that matched the curtains. Nothing out of place. Nothing real. Norman sat in an armchair across from the sofa. Ryan took the center seat, sprawled casually, one arm draped across the back cushions. Brooke remained standing near the kitchen entrance, coffee mug in hand, watching. "Can I get you anything?" she asked. "Coffee? Water?" "No. Thank you," Norman said. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The posture of someone about to say something important. "I won't take much of your time." Ryan's grin widened. "Hey, no worries. I get it. Things got heated the other night, and told me you were upset about." "Ryan," Norman interrupted gently. "I'm sorry." The room shifted. Ryan's smile held, but something flickered behind it. "I'm sorry," Norman continued, his voice steady and clear, "that I waited this long." Brooke's brow furrowed. She set her mug down on the counter with a soft clink. Waited for what? Ryan's expression began to crack, the confidence draining like water through a broken dam. Norman turned to Brooke, held her gaze, spoke the words he'd rehearsed for 3 weeks. I should have told you sooner that your husband and my wife have been sleeping together for almost a year. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of held breath, of suspended moments, of the world reorganizing itself around new and terrible information. Brooke didn't move. Her face went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ryan exploded to his feet. That's a lie. His voice climbed an octave. Brooke, he's lying. This is crazy. Norman raised one hand. Calm. Controlled. The gesture of a man who'd already won and was just following procedure. Table rock in, he said, his voice level. Room 214. March 12th. You paid in cash, but you used your car's GPS to get there. She left her bracelet behind, the silver one with the turquoise stone. You returned it to her 2 days later at the coffee shop on Walnut Street. Ryan's face drained of color. You're insane. You've been stalking us? This is... Norman reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen twice, then slid it across the glass coffee table. Audio played, crystal clear, Anne's voice, breathy and intimate. I can't stop thinking about you. A pause, rustling fabric, then her laugh, soft and conspiratorial. Ryan, we shouldn't. More sounds. A kiss, wet and unmistakable. Ryan's voice, deeper. Tell me you want this. And, whispering, you know I do. Brooke made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. Something broken. She sat down heavily on the arm of the sofa, her hand over her mouth. Ryan stared at the phone like it was a grenade. That's not. You recorded us? That's illegal. One-party consent state, Norman said quietly. Missouri law. Perfectly legal to record conversations you're part of, or that occur in places you have permission to be. He paused. And I share a car insurance policy. The GPS tracking? That's legal too. You'd be surprised what's admissible. Ryan's hands were shaking. He ran them through his hair, turned in a circle like a cornered animal looking for an exit. It just happened, he said, his voice desperate now, aimed at Brooke. We didn't plan it. It was a mistake. You planned, Norman said, standing. His voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. You just didn't plan on consequences. Brooke stood too, trembling. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't cried yet. Shocked, Norman thought. The tears would come later. How long, she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Ryan's mouth worked soundlessly. Norman answered for him. Since last summer, while you were in Florida visiting your mother, and told me she was going to a work conference in Kansas City. Instead, she met Ryan at a lake cabin outside of Osage Beach. He paused. The rental was under his name. Credit card records confirmed it. The sound Brooke made this time was definitely a sob. She covered her face with both hands. Ryan moved toward her. Brooke, please. Don't. The word came out sharp. She stepped back, arms wrapping around herself. Don't touch me. Norman picked up his phone from the table, pocketed it. He'd said what he came to say. He walked toward the door. Behind him, Brooke spoke. Thank you. Norman turned. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, but she was looking at him with something like gratitude. He nodded once. Nothing more needed to be said. As he opened the door, Ryan's voice followed him, ragged and desperate. You think you're some kind of hero? You just destroyed 2 marriages. Norman paused in the doorway. He didn't turn around. I didn't destroy anything, he said quietly. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. He closed the door behind him. The morning air felt clean. Norman drove back to the lake house in silence. His hands were steady on the wheel. His pulse was normal. He felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, just a quiet sense of completion, like finishing a difficult project at work. The lake house looked exactly as he'd left it. Anne's car was still in the driveway. Through the window, he could see her moving around the kitchen, probably making herself busy to avoid thinking. He parked but didn't go inside. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. Nothing from Anne yet. She didn't know. Brooke and Ryan were probably still in their living room, the wreckage of their marriage scattered around them like broken glass. Norman opened his banking app, checked the balance on their joint savings account. $0. He moved it all 3 weeks ago, transferred it to a new account in his name only. Their financial advisor had helped, a younger guy who'd been sympathetic when Norman explained he was concerned about identity theft. The money was safe now, untouchable buy-in. His phone buzzed. "Anne, we need to talk." Then another message, seconds later. "Where did you go?" Norman pocketed the phone without responding. He got out of the car and walked down to the lake's edge instead of going inside. The water lapped gently against the rocky shore. A bird called somewhere in the trees, sharp and insistent, like a warning. He thought about his father, about those lessons taught in a kitchen that smelled like engine oil and instant coffee. Never beg, never borrow dignity. Stand on your own 2 feet. Norman had tried to build something with, and a partnership, a life. He'd been honest, worked hard, stayed faithful. He'd thought that mattered. Apparently, it hadn't. His phone buzzed again, and again, and again. He let it ring. By evening, and had called 57 times. Norman sat in a motel room 12 miles from the lake house, the kind of place that rented by the week and didn't ask questions. The room was clean enough. Bed, television, small bathroom that smelled like bleach. He'd checked in under his own name, paid with a credit card, and didn't have access to. His phone sat on a nightstand, screen dark, counting the missed calls. On the 58th call, he answered. "You humiliated me." And his voice was high and sharp, crackling with fury. "You went to their house? You told Brooke? You ruined everything." Norman leaned back against the headboard. The pillows were thin, covered in rough fabric that scratched against his neck. "I corrected the record," he said calmly. "You had no right." She was crying now, her voice breaking. "This was between us. You didn't need to destroy Ryan's marriage." "His marriage was already destroyed," Norman said. "He just didn't know it yet. Neither did Brooke." It made a frustrated sound. "You think you're so smart. You think you won something. But you expose yourself too. Everyone's going to know now. Everyone's going to know our marriage failed." Norman smiled for the first time in days. The expression felt strange on his face, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. "Did I?" he asked. There was a pause. He could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven. "What does that mean?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "It means you should check our bank account," Norman said. "And then you should call a lawyer." He hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. He turned it face down on the nightstand and went to take a shower. 3 days later, Norman met with his attorney in a coffee shop downtown. The place was busy with the lunch crowd, business people grabbing sandwiches, students hunched over laptops, the hiss of the espresso machine providing white noise. David Martinez was in his 50s, graying at the temples, with the patient demeanor of a man who'd seen every variation of human failure. He'd handled Norman's father's estate years ago, had been thorough and fair. Norman trusted him. "I filed the papers this morning," David said, sliding a folder across the table. "Given the evidence you provided, this should be straightforward. Adultery's still grounds for fault-based divorce in Missouri. She won't get spousal support." Norman opened the folder. Legal documents, dense with language, but the meaning was clear. Dissolution of marriage. Division of assets. His name at the top, Anne's at the bottom. "The recording is admissible?" Norman asked. "Absolutely. Missouri's one-party consent. You were present during parts of it, and in your shared vehicle for others. Plus the GPS data, the credit card records, the text messages." David tapped the folder. "You built a solid case. Most people don't think this clearly when their marriage is falling apart." "I'm a planner," Norman said simply. David studied him for a moment. "Are you okay? I know this can't be easy." Norman considered the question. Was he okay? He wasn't sad exactly. He wasn't angry anymore. He felt clean, like he'd finally put down something heavy he'd been carrying too long. "I'm fine," he said. David nodded slowly. "She'll contest it. They always do. But with this evidence, her lawyer will advise her to settle. Expect some back and forth, but you'll come out ahead." Norman closed the folder. "What about Ryan Holloway? What about him? Can I use the recordings for anything else?" David's eyebrows rose. "Such as?" Norman pulled out his phone, opened a different audio file, one he hadn't played for Brooke. He set on the table between them and pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the space between them, cocky and careless. "Ends easy. She was bored, and I was available. It's not like it means anything. She thinks I'm going to leave Brooke for her. Like that's ever happening." A pause. Laughter. "She's fun, but she's not Brooke. Not even close." Norman stopped the playback. David sat back in his chair. "When did you record this?" "Last month. Parking lot outside his office." He was on the phone with someone. "I was sitting in my car 2 spots over." "You were following him?" "I was being thorough." David rubbed his jaw. "What are you thinking? His company has a morality clause." "I checked. Conduct that damages the company's reputation can be grounds for termination." Norman kept his voice level. "I'm thinking Ryan should face consequences too." David was quiet for a long moment. "That's vindictive." "That's fair," Norman corrected. "You'll make an enemy." "I already have one." David sighed, picked up his coffee, took a long sip. When he set the cup down, his expression had shifted into something more clinical. "Professional. If you send that to his employer, make sure you do it anonymously. Create a new email account. Don't include anything that could be traced back to you." He paused. "And understand this crosses a line. This isn't self-defense anymore. This is offensive action." Norman nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" David leaned forward. "Because once you do this, you can't take it back. And it won't make you feel better." "I don't need to feel better," Norman said. "I need to feel finished." Norman sent the email that night. He created a new account, a random string of numbers and letters, routed through a VPN service that masked his IP address. The email was simple, professional. Subject line, "Employee conduct concern." Body text, "Please review the attached audio file regarding Ryan Holloway, sales manager. This recording was obtained legally and may violate company policy regarding professional conduct." He attached the file. Hit send. Then he deleted the account and cleared his browser history. He felt nothing. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just completion. 2 days later, Brooke called him. "I got the recording," she said without preamble. Her voice was different now. Harder, emptied of softness. The one of Ryan talking about, and Norman had sent it to her too, from a different anonymous account. She deserved to know the full truth. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," Norman said. "Don't be." Brooke's laugh was bitter. "I needed to. I was actually considering. God, I was going to try counseling. I thought maybe we could fix it." She paused. "He never loved her. He just used her. And he used me too." "Yes," Norman agreed. "I filed for divorce this morning." "Good." Another pause. Then, "Did you send it to his work too?" Norman didn't answer. "It's okay if you did," Brooke continued. "He deserves it. Actually, he deserves worse." "People usually get what they deserve," Norman said. "Eventually. I hope you're right." She took a shaky breath. "Thank you, Norman, for telling me, for not letting me live in ignorance. You would have done the same." "Maybe." She didn't sound certain. "Take care of yourself." She hung up. Norman sat on the motel bed, phone in hand, and thought about consequences, about actions and reactions, about the careful architecture of revenge. His phone buzzed. A notification, not a call, an alert from the credit monitoring service he'd set up, and had tried to access their joint account. Access denied. Norman set the phone aside and lay back on the bed. Through the thin walls, he could hear a television playing. Canned laughter. Normal life continuing for someone else. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in months, slept soundly. For days after Norman sent the email, Ryan Holloway lost his job. Norman heard about it from David, who'd heard it from Brooke's attorney. The company had conducted an internal investigation, brief and perfunctory, but enough to satisfy HR. Ryan's conduct had violated their ethics policy. They'd offered him the option to resign voluntarily rather than face termination. He'd taken it. Within a week, Ryan's LinkedIn profile changed. Seeking new opportunities, it said. The corporate headshot remained, that confident smile, that easy charm, but Norman knew what it meant. Unemployed, discredited, divorced. Everything Ryan had built on lies was collapsing. Norman felt no joy in it, just a quiet sense of mathematics resolving correctly, and showed up at the motel 2 weeks later. Norman was reading when he heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, then silence. He'd been expecting this, had prepared for it. He opened the door and stood in the hallway, looking smaller than he remembered. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung loose. Her face was drawn. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping. "Can I come in?" she asked. Norman stepped aside. She entered slowly, taking in the sparse room. The single bed, the small television, the suitcase in the corner containing everything he'd taken from their shared life. "This is where you've been staying?" she asked. "Yes." She turned to face him. Her eyes were red, pleading. "Norman, we need to talk about this. Really talk. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about." Her voice broke. "Our marriage. Our life. We can fix this. I know we can." Norman closed the door, leaned against it, studied her like she was a logistics problem. Inputs, outputs, inefficiencies. "You slept with Ryan Holloway for 11 months, he said calmly. "You lied to me approximately 247 times. That's just the lies I can document. You spent our money on hotel rooms and gifts for him. You planned a future without me while pretending nothing was wrong." He paused. "What exactly do you think we can fix?" Anne's face crumpled. She sat on the edge of the bed, crying into her hands. The sobs were loud, messy, raw. Norman watched without moving. "I made a mistake," she said between gasps. "A terrible mistake. But people make mistakes, Norman. That's what marriage is, forgiving each other. Some mistakes are unforgivable." "That's not true." She looked up at him, mascara streaking her cheeks. "You're a good man. You believe in second chances. You always have." "I believed in you," Norman corrected. "That was my mistake." She stood, crossed the small space between them, put her hand on his chest. "Please, I'm begging you. Don't throw away 10 years over this. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild. I'll do anything. There is no version of my future that includes you," Norman said quietly. The words landed like stones in still water. Anne's hand dropped. She stepped back, her expression shifting from desperation to something harder. Anger, maybe, or just recognition. "You're enjoying this," she said. "You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself. By destroying me." Her voice climbed. "You took our money. You filed for divorce without telling me. You ruined Ryan's career. This isn't protection, Norman. This is revenge. It's consequence," he said. "There's a difference." And laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You think you're so righteous, so morally superior, but you're just cruel." Norman considered this. Was he cruel? He'd exposed the truth, documented evidence, followed legal procedures. Everything he'd done was justified, proportional. And yet, he thought about Ryan, unemployed and disgraced, about and facing divorce and financial uncertainty, about himself, alone in a motel room, technically victorious. Was this cruelty, or was it justice? "I don't need to be righteous," Norman said finally. "I just need to be finished," and stared at him. For a moment, he saw something like recognition in her eyes. A understanding that this conversation was over, had always been over, was just a formality she needed to complete. "I loved you," she said softly. "No," Norman replied. "You love the idea of me, the provider, the steady hand, the man who wouldn't make waves." He paused. "But I'm not that man anymore." She left without another word. Norman watched through the window as she got into her car, a sedan he'd co-signed for 3 years ago. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time before starting the engine. He wondered if she was crying. He didn't particularly care. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Norman sat in David's office while the attorney explained the settlement. No fault had been abandoned once, and saw the evidence. She'd taken the deal her lawyer recommended. A clean split of remaining assets, no spousal support, no custody issues to complicate things. "You came out well," David said. "Better than well, honestly." Norman signed the final papers. His signature was neat, practiced. He'd signed his name thousands of times, on contracts, on purchase orders, on birthday cards for her, and this was the last time he'd sign it for her. "What now?" David asked. Norman stood, shook the lawyer's hand. "Now I moved forward." Outside, the day was clear and cool. Fall had fully arrived, painting the trees in copper and gold. Norman walked to his car, a newer model, purchased last week with money from the account and couldn't touch. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy with yourself. Ryan. Had to be. Norman deleted the message without responding. He drove north, away from the city, away from the lake house they'd rented for what was supposed to be a healing vacation. He drove until the subdivisions thinned out, until the trees grew denser, until he found himself on a two-lane highway that cut through forest and farmland. After an hour, he saw it, a lake community, smaller than Table Rock, quieter. Houses dotted the shoreline, some seasonal, some permanent. A realtor's sign advertised lots still available. Norman pulled over, walked down to the water's edge. The lake was calm, clearer than Table Rock had been. Through the surface, he could see rocks and fish and the clean architecture of the underwater world. He thought about starting over, about buying a small house here. Something simple, room enough for one person and all the peace that came with solitude. He thought about his father, about that lesson learned in poverty and pride. Stand on your own 2 feet. Norman had stood, was still standing. He pulled out his phone and called the realtor's number. 3 months later, Norman stood in the kitchen of his new house. Not rented, owned. A modest 2-bedroom with lake access and no memories attached. He furnished it simply. Nothing fancy, nothing matching. Just functional pieces that served their purpose. Outside, winter was settling in. The lake had frozen at the edges, turning the shore into a gallery of ice sculptures. The trees were bare. The sky was the color of old concrete. Inside, Norman made coffee. Real coffee this time, not the cheap tourist trap kind. He'd bought a decent machine, learned to appreciate the ritual of grinding beans, measuring water, waiting for that first dark stream to fill his cup. He didn't think about it anymore. She'd moved to Ohio, he'd heard, closer to her sister, starting over somewhere people didn't know her story. Ryan had found work again, some smaller company, sales position with less prestige. Brooke had kept the house. Last Norman heard, she was dating someone new. A teacher, someone quiet and stable. Good for her. Norman carried his coffee to the window. Watched the lake. Watched the ice grow. He didn't feel joy exactly. Joy seemed like too bright a word for what he felt. But he felt clean, settled, like a wound that had finally healed over, leaving just a scar, visible but no longer painful. His phone sat on the counter, silent. No angry calls. No desperate messages. No lies wrapped in affection. Just quiet. Norman raised his coffee cup in a private toast to no one in particular. Some endings aren't about forgiveness, he thought. Some are about control. And he'd never lost it. Not really. Not when it mattered. He took a sip. The coffee was good. Hot and strong and exactly what he'd wanted. Outside, a bird landed on the frozen lake. It walked across the ice carefully, testing each step before committing its weight. Norman understood completely. He finished his coffee, rinsed the cup, and went to start his day.